Hey guys, and welcome to another video for No Hands Proxies. In this video I'm going to be going into a bit more depth about what all of the different settings and options do, so that you can see how No Hands Proxies can be used to get a specific type of proxy or to be able to use them in a specific way. Okay, so I'm going to load up No Hands Proxies. Here we are. Now, even though it's an incredibly easy to use proxy harvesting tool that will do pretty much everything for you, it is also really quite configurable, so there is a lot that you can do to tell it what type of proxies that you want, so that you're getting a specific type of proxies that you can use for whatever it is that you want to do. Okay, so to start off with, to change the different settings, we're going to go to the settings tab. Now, the first tab that you get to will be the app settings. This is one of 6. You've got app settings, output options, you've got the proxy testing options, region filtering, port filtering, and the initial proxy sources. Okay, so in the app settings tab, we have a list of limit options here and how long to retest and whether to save the proxies when you close. These can be used to limit the amount of proxies harvested, and also the amount of how many you want to limit. This will stop any harvesting jobs from that point on. So if you want to limit to, say, 10,000 proxies, when No Hands Proxies goes out and actually finds websites to download proxies from, it will stop adding any more jobs. So say you set it to 10,000, once the amount of proxies it's harvested has got to 10,000 or gone over, it will not add any more jobs. So, you know, all of the time then spent will be on checking the proxies and making sure they work. Realistically, I'm not sure if there's going to be many people that will use an option like that, but the option's there if you want. Say you only wanted, say, 10 working proxies, you can use the limit working proxies, that option there. Simply check it, as with the limit harvested proxies, you check it and set the amount of proxies that you want, and then click save settings, and it will make sure that once it's found your 10 working proxies, it will no longer bother testing any more proxies. Okay, it's as simple as that. It's dead easy. If you only want a few working proxies, then you know you can use that option, but obviously for most people they'll want as many proxies as they can get, so they'll just leave it running. You can also set the interval at which to retry the proxies. Now, obviously, the lower you set that, the quicker it will be rechecking the proxies. But what that means is that it won't, it won't get a chance to check more proxies that often. So, say you set that to 5 minutes, and you've got thousands of proxies that are working, it's going to take more than the 5 minutes to check all of them anyway, so it's not going to be finding new proxies, but at least you know that the ones that you have will be fully working and usable for any use that you could want. Now, the save working proxies on exit is a really great little option, because what it will do is when you close No Hands Proxies, it will save the list of working proxies, so that next time you load it up, rather than going to the initial proxy sources or searching out new proxies, it will just check that list to make sure that if there's any proxies that are still working in that list, it can use them right off the bat, rather than having to go out and filter through potentially thousands to get, you know, a handful of proxies. So that's a really good option to have checked if you're going to be using it relatively regularly. Obviously, if you're only going to be using it every few days, once or twice, then it's not going to be a huge amount of difference, but for the amount of effort, you may as well leave it checked. Okay, your worker threads, this is how many proxies can be checked simultaneously. So if you have a great connection, you could set it to 100 or more, and it will get through the proxy list really quite quickly. If you've got a connection that isn't quite so great, then you probably want to set it to, I don't know, 10, 15, 20, somewhere in that region, just so that, you know, it's not trying to do more than your internet connection can handle. Okay, if you're really not sure about how many threads that your connection can handle, you can just click the test for max thread settings, and it will actually tell you roughly how many connections are the absolute maximum. Realistically, if it tells you that the maximum is 200, I still would set it at, say, 120 to 150, just so that there is a lot of leeway, especially if you're in a domestic area, because the variation between the connection and what it can handle does change quite a lot. Now, the connection timeout, this is how long a proxy takes to connect to the test server. So if you set that lower, say you set it to 5,000, that would make sure that all of the proxies that you get are really quite fast and that they're all responding within 5 seconds, which for a public proxy is actually pretty good. The read-write timeout is relatively inconsequential. Any working proxy should respond within 5 seconds once it's connected. The most of the delay is in the connection itself, so you can change either of those to your heart's content. Ultimately, as with pretty much all of these settings and options, if you're not sure what they are, you're best to just leave alone. If you don't know what they are or whether you need it or not, just don't use it. Ultimately, if you know that you need to change something, the option's there and you'll probably understand the terminology, but ultimately, if you're not sure, probably just leave it alone and just press start. That's all that's really needed. There is an explanation of what every control does. If you just hover over each control for a few seconds, you'll see there will be an explanation of what it does, how it affects things, and also the type of input that it accepts, if it's not just a checkbox or something like that. Okay, so they're your basic application settings and how they can be used to change how No Hands Proxies works and how quickly it runs. Now, there's also the output options where you can output the list of proxies very easily, automatically, to a text file or a CSV file. A CSV file is similar to a text file, except it contains more information, such as the transparency, whether it's an anonymous, a transparent, or an elite proxy. It contains information of the latency, which is the speed of the proxy, where the proxy is based, and different information like that. Okay, most tools that are using the proxies, if you're going to be using them in a tool, they'll be using the text file. So if you're going to be outputting to a file, you're best to stick with a text file unless you know that you need all the extra information, in which case you can go with the .csv file. Now, the first options you want to be checking for outputting the proxies is the output interval. Now, there's two options here. You can either check to output the proxies every X amount of minutes. You can set that to whatever you want. Say 60 minutes is an hour, you can set it to 5 minutes if you want to output the proxies more often than that, or you can output the proxies on every time the working list is updated. The list of working proxies is updated. Now, that's good if you want to make sure that you have a really up-to-date list of proxies, but if you're going to be outputting to email or FTP, I'd suggest that you have it on a time limit, because that list of proxies, even though the number's only gone up a handful in the time that I've been making this video, it will be updated more often than it looks, because obviously it's going to be rechecking the proxies, and every time it's rechecked, it's going to update the list. Every time it's checked against a website, say you'll be using the proxies for searching in Google, every time it's checked that it can actually be used for that purpose, it will update the proxy list. So if you're using the output proxy list to email option, it will be spamming you really quite often. So if you are going to be using the output to email or FTP, you are really best off having the output proxies every X minutes and setting it to, say, 10 minutes or 5 minutes if you want a really fresh list but don't want to just hammer your server. Okay, output into a file is really quite straightforward. You just check that you want to output it to a local file, and then you choose where you want to store the file. It's really that simple. Okay, and then you obviously save the settings. To output to an email, it's a little bit more complicated, but that's because the way it's set up is to ensure that you always get the email. Now, because it's going to be sending regular emails, it needs to have a source email address that it comes from. So say you're sending it to Gmail, for example, you'd set proxy email at gmail.com, and that's, or proxy destination email at gmail.com. Now that's where the email will be sent to. Okay, that's where you want to receive the list of proxies to. Now the email from, this needs to be a genuine email address, so it can be a free email address from Outlook or somewhere like that, or it can be from your web host, say from One-on-One or HostGator, GoDaddy, places like that. You need to put in your some email address at, let's say, outlook.com, and then your host would be to enter in your Outlook SMTP files. Now I'm going to quickly go and check to see what they are, but this should be very easy to find. Okay, yep, I've got the Outlook options here. Now for pretty much any web email or anything like that, these settings are the SMTP settings. Now they can be found usually on the website itself, but if you're struggling, if you just go into Google and type the name of your email host, in this instance it would be outlook.com, so you'd put outlook.com and then type in SMTP settings. If you hover over the host, it will tell you the SMTP part of the email settings. So if you're unsure of what they are, so just smtp.live.com is the server for Outlook. The port on nearly all email hosts that I could find were 587, so I'd leave the port at 587, and then you'd put in your username and some password, and then you click test, and obviously because I've just made up these settings, the test wouldn't work, but you can use the test to make sure that your settings are set up correctly before relying on it for getting your emails. But if the test comes back successful, then you know that you've entered in the details correct. If you're struggling with any of this, obviously you can always get in touch at support@nohandsproxies.com or support@nohandsseo.com, or use the support forum at nohandsseo.com/forum. Now I'm happy to help anyone with this. I am going to be setting up a list of common email servers like Outlook, Gmail, One-on-One, HostGator, all these other common ones that a lot of people are using, just to make things easier, because obviously it's not something that everybody's dealt with in the time, but it's normally very easy to find the different SMTP settings for your email host. Okay, so that's all you need to do. You click save once the test's successful, and then whenever the time is passed, or whenever the working list is updated, it will send you an email. Okay, now for output into an FTP, it's largely the same as an email, except obviously the login details are related to your FTP server. Now luckily there's also a test button here, so say I wanted to upload it to test domain, put ftp.testdomain.com. Now I'm assuming that you know the FTP address for the server and the username and the password and things like that for this. So I would put in the username and the password that you would use to connect to the server. Now directory, this can be any directory that you want, but I suggest that it's a directory that already exists. So if you leave it blank, it will put it into the home directory, providing you have access to that, write access to that. So you don't need to add anything there, but I'm going to put proxy file, so it'll put it in the proxy file folder. I'll change that to proxy folder, and then in here file.txt, because I'm going to upload it as a .txt file, and then you'd save the settings and test the FTP settings. Now providing all your settings are correct, it'll do a test connect and upload a test file just to make sure that all the settings are correct, and then as with the output to email, it will then upload the file every interval or every time the working list of proxies is updated. Okay, so I realise there's quite a bit to those two options, the output to email and the output to FTP, but as with anything, if you know that you need to do that, it's probably the case that you already know, for instance, the SMTP address or the FTP address and all the details that go along with it. If not, it shouldn't be that hard to find it, because most web hosts will be able to provide you with the FTP details, and pretty much all email hosts will be able to provide you with the SMTP server details. So if you're unsure about them, then you can often find them on the internet, but failing that, just get in touch. I'm always happy to help out wherever I can. Okay, so to be honest, that's the hard bit out of the way now. We can get on to the much simpler bits, the testing settings, the proxy testing settings. Now here, this is a list of the different websites that No Hands Proxies is currently able to test against. The final release version, there will be Craigslist, Twitter, and a bunch of other different websites that No Hands Proxies will be able to automatically test against, and then after release there will be even more. Okay, so if you have a website that isn't listed by the time you get in touch, and if it's possible to test the proxies on those websites, I'll be quite happy to add them in for you. So if you have a specific website that you want to be using the proxies for, then all you need to do is just check the website. Say for instance you wanted to be searching Google. All you need to do is check the option next to Google, click save, and then every new proxy that's found, it will test to make sure that it can be used to search Google. Okay, it's really that simple. All you need to do is check the box next to the website that you want the proxies to be tested against, and then save the settings, and it will do it all for you. That's all there is to it. Okay, now if you have a specific requirement for anonymity, then you can set it in here as well. Just the same, if you need anonymous or elite proxies, you can set it in here. If you need elite proxies, you can set it there. Just as you can have transparent. Now obviously transparent are the least anonymous. Anonymous is then the next step up in anonymity, where most websites won't be able to see where your actual location is, but in certain circumstances it still will be able to, whereas elite proxies will hide any chance of a specific server service from being able to know where you are actually located. So if if anonymity is really important to you, then obviously you can choose elite, but leaving it as transparent will mean that you get a lot more proxies that are working. Okay, so region filtering. If you know that you need proxies from a specific region, or you can use proxies, any type of proxies but ones from a specific region, then you want to be using the region filtering here. So, okay, so to enable these options, you just check the filter proxies by region option, and then if you need, say for example, proxies from say Europe, you just check only allow proxies from these regions, and then you click Europe. Or for example, if you needed ones just from Afghanistan, you could click them like that. It's really easy. All you need to do is that, and then save, and then what will happen is that any proxy that isn't from that region will be discarded, so you will only get proxies that are from the region in your whitelist, if that's what you want. Obviously these are optional, you don't need to use these, but if that's what you want, you can use that. And conversely, you can block proxies from a specific region by using the blacklist option, and then for example if you did not want them from the United Arab Emirates and Afghanistan, for example, you could select those two, click save, and then it would simply block proxies from that region. Okay, you can use multiple ones of these, use as many as you want, as few as you want. You don't need to use them if you don't want to. There's no need to use them unless you know that you need to use them. Okay, but it's really that simple. You just check whether you want to be using the whitelist, which means that you only get proxies from that from those regions, or you can use a blacklist to make sure that you don't get proxies from a specific set of regions, and then click save, and then any proxies that don't meet either of those requirements will be blocked. And it's the same for the port filtering. You have your whitelist where you are effectively telling the tool that you only want proxies from that list, or you don't want any proxies from that list. Okay, it's the same. You check the filter proxies by port, and then whitelist if you want to be using the whitelist, or blacklist if you want to be using the blacklist. The only difference here is that you have to enter in the port manually, just one by one. So the ports that are listed here are the common ports. They're commonly seen as bad ports. Generally, you're not going to find too many of them, but if you wanted to, you could remove them and add in your own blacklist. If, for instance, your service or software that you're using can only use proxies from a specific port, then you can use the whitelist. If you know that it can't use proxies on a specific port, you can use the blacklist there. But ultimately, if you know that you need to use it, the option's there. If you don't know that you need to use it, chances are you don't need to use it, so you're better off not even looking at them. Okay, so that's port filtering. And initial proxy sources. When you first load No Hands Proxies, the first thing it will do is it will download a list of proxy sources from our server, and then it will go to each one and download the list of proxies from each one of them, and then start checking those proxies. Once it's done that, it will then use the proxies that it finds to search Google, Yahoo, and different search engines to find new proxies to ensure that your list is different to everyone else's, and that the list of proxies that you're working from is fresh and up to date, and that you're getting more of the working proxies that you can. Now, if you don't want to use the built-in proxy list, say you don't want to be using at all the same proxy list that other users are using, or you want to add a few sources to that list, that's fine. You can replace the initial proxy sources by checking the box here, and then adding in your different, say, proxysource.com, and then add in proxygood.com/page1.html, and all you need to do is just add each new proxy source one by one on its own line with no extra information. That's all you need to do. You can add as many sources as you want, or as few. Again, this is another option. If you don't know if you need to use it or not, just don't use it. If you don't know that you need to use it, chances are you don't. Okay, but you can replace the initial proxy sources, which means that it won't use any of the proxy sources built into No Hands Proxies, or you can add to the proxy sources, which means it will still use the built-in list, but it will also add on the sources that you enter in here. Okay, so you just use them, and then you can save the settings and they'll be applied. So in a nutshell, in a 25-minute nutshell, that is all the settings that are currently in No Hands Proxies. Now obviously things are liable to change and get added as time goes on, especially the list of websites to check against. But things will always be kept just as simple. The way I like to keep my software is that simplicity is the key, because then obviously it means that more people can get use out of it, and also people can get up and running with it quicker that way. So again, if you have any questions about anything related to No Hands Proxies, you can get in touch via the contact form on the website at nohandsproxies.com, via the support email addresses, either support@nohandsproxies.com or support@nohandsseo.com, or you can get on the support forum, where there's bound to be some discussions about things that might help you. There's going to be some written guides. There's a full user manual on there. That's nohandsseo.com/forum. So also if there's things that you want to be added in, say you've got a feature request or a website that you'd like to be added to the check against website list, then by all means get in touch via any of those methods and let me know what it is that you'd like adding or that you're struggling with, and I'll do my best to help you. Okay, thanks again for watching this video. I hope it's not put you all to sleep, and that it's helped you in some ways to illuminate what certain settings do. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers, bye now.